Welcome back to another video on the Monkey Mathematician. Today we'll be looking at another topic focusing on rounding and estimating. Our learning outcomes for this video is to learn when to round up and round down, and to also learn how to give an exact answer to the stated amounts of significant figures or decimal places. So we'll decide to start looking at rounding up. So how do we know when to round up? So we round up when the number is followed by a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. So again, if the number has a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, we can be able to round up. An example here is from 5,865. So we're to round 5,865 to the nearest tens, which is the first one. So let us first write 5,865 out. Now something about 5,865 is that it has place values. So the first one is the ones or units. The second one is the tens. The third is the hundreds rather. And the third is the thousands. So these are what we call their place values or place units. So they say we're to round up to the nearest tens. So the nearest tens has to do with the number 6, because that is where the place value of 6 is. That's the place value of 10. So we know that the number that follows the place value has to either be a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. So an example here, we have 5 that follows the 6. Due to the 5 following the 6, we can round it up. How do we round up? What we do is that we take the 6, we do a plus 1, and so that makes it 7. And then when we make it 7, we then change the 5 here and make it 0. And then we have the remaining over here. So 5,865 rounded to the nearest tens is 5,870. The next one is rounded to the nearest hundreds. So the place value for hundreds is at 8. So now that we know this, we look at the number that follows the place value of hundreds, which is 6. Again, 6 is inside the range of 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, where we can round up. And so what we'll do, again, is that we'll add 1 to 8. So that makes it 9. And then we make 6 to be 0. And then we also make 5 to be 0. And then we make 5, and then we bring our 5 down. So once we're done rounding up, something to remember, once we're done rounding up, the number that follow that place value has to turn to 0. And the example for the last one will be so. Round 5,865 to the nearest thousand. So thousands has the place value of 5, and then we look at the number that follows it, which is 8. 8 is in the range that we can round up. So then we add 1 to the 5. So that turns it into 6. So then it will be 6. And the numbers that follow after, so 8 will turn into 0, 6 will turn into 0, and 5 will turn into 0. So 5,865 rounded to the nearest thousands becomes 6,000. So answers are going to be here: 6,000, 5,900, and 5,970. So with that being said, we go on to the next part. So rounding down is our next part, and if the number we're rounding down is followed by a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, we have to round the number down. Now we'll start with the number 1,324. Remember, 4 in this case holds the place value of ones, 2 in this case holds the place value of tens, 3 holds the place value of hundreds, and 1 holds the place value of, 1 holds the place value of thousands. So with that being said, we're to round 1,324 to the nearest tens. So we go to the place value that holds tens, which is 2. And then we look at the number that follows it, which is 4. 4 is in the range where we can round down because it's in between 0 to 4. And so what we do is that instead of adding, or as we saw, we added in rounding up, but instead of subtracting, in this case in rounding down, but it actually only have 2 to stay. So 2 will stay and 4 will turn into 0. And then after that, we have the remaining numbers before 2 that will stay the same. So that will become 1320. The next question is that we're to turn round 1324 to the nearest hundreds. And so you go to the place value of hundreds, which is 3. And so we turn this because 3 is starting, and so we go to the next number that follows it, which is 2. Again, 2 is inside the range where we're to round down. So we'll still keep the number 3, and then we'll turn 2 and 4 into 0 because the numbers that follow have to turn into 0. And then we'll keep 1 because 1 is before. So this will turn into 1300. And then the next question is that we're to turn, or rather, round 1324 to the nearest thousands. So then we go to the thousands place value, which holds 1, and then we look at the number followed by 1, which is 3. 3 is in the range where we round down again. So as you've seen, we'll turn this into 0. Rather, we'll keep 1, turn this into 0, 0, and 0. So then it'll be 1000. So now after this, you should be able to know how to round up and round down. After this, we'll be looking into the decimal places and significant figures. And these are 2 very important concepts because you'll be learning that a lot in school. And so we'll take a look into them. So we're looking at decimal places. And something to note is that numbers can have a point that come at the end of the specified number, rather, that can allow more numbers to come after it. So the numbers that come after the points in the number, as I said, is called they are called decimals, rather. And these decimals have places. So 3 in this 24.3679 is called the first decimal place, or else also known as tenths. 6 is called the second decimal place, or other known as hundredths. 7 is known as the thousands, which is the third decimal place, and 9 is the 10,000s, which is the fourth decimal place. And this can increase further and further to 5 decimal places, 6 decimal places, so more numbers can come after the number. And so what we need to know is how to be able to round up to the nearest decimal place. And so we can start off with the first decimal place in this question, 24.3679. So we're to first round up to the first decimal place. So this will take off the 3. So 3 is the first decimal place. So we look at the second number, or rather the number that is after 3, which is 6. Now 6 can round up because it's in between the range of 5 to 9. So you can round this number up of 3 by adding 1 to it. So adding 1 to it turns it to 4, and then the numbers after will be turned to 0. So this will be 0, 0, and 0. And then we have the numbers before it remaining. So 24.4000, or other known as 24.4. The second question is obviously to the second decimal place. And so we'll look at 6. So 6 is now the second decimal place. So look at the number after 6, which is 7. 7 can be rounded up. And so this will turn it to 7. Number 6 will turn into 7 because we're adding it by 1. And the numbers after 6, or rather after 7 now, will turn into 0 and 0. And the numbers before will remain. So now it will be 24.3700 or 24.37. The next number is to the third decimal place. And the number that is over the third decimal place is 7. So 7 is now there. And what we'll do is that we'll look at the next number, which is 9. 9 can be rounded up, so we'll add 1 to 7. So this becomes 8. And then we look at the other numbers, which is 0. So 8 will be here, and 9 will turn into 0. So, and the remaining numbers before 7 would now remain. So 3, 4, and 2. So to the 8 decimal places, we turn it to 24.368. And the last one is very interesting, where it asks us to turn it to the whole number. And something to note is that whole number is the 4 that's over here. is the one that retains the whole numbers. You can say the whole numbers place. So we look at the number that's next to 4, which is 3. So now that 3 cannot be rounded up, rather it should be rounded down because 3 is in between the range of 0 to 4. What we'll do is that we'll then say 24 will stay as 4. And then we'll have 2 to remain. So now it will remain as 24, and then the remaining will now be 0, 0, 0, 0. And so what we will have is only 24 for the last one. This goes to show that when you're asked to round up to the nearest whole number, you must keep it as a whole number, as in without a point. The point should disappear. And what you must do you must look at the next number, which is 3, and then use that to either round up or round down the remaining number. With that being clear, look at some examples. And so, example is round 64.839906 to the nearest whole number. That's the first question. And so what we look at here is the nearest whole number. Remember what I said in the previous slide, and 4 kind of contains that whole number name, in a sense, that whole number's place. So what we'll do is that we'll keep 4, and then we'll look at the number after 4, which is 8. 8 is in the range of rounding up because, again, it's in between 5 and 9. So what we do is that we'll add 1 to 4, and then we'll turn it to 5. The number before 4 will remain, which will be 6. And then the other numbers will turn to 0. So 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And so what we'll have here is 65. So with that being said, we turn to the next question, and it's to turn it to the first decimal place. Remember, 8 is the first decimal place. So we look at the number that's after 8, which is 3. 3 has to be rounded down because it's in between range of 0 to 4. And so what we'll do here is that we'll keep 8, and then the numbers after will turn to 0. So 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And the numbers before will be remaining. So 4, 6, and the points. So this answer will now become 64.8. And the last question has us taken it to 3 decimal places. So 64.839906. So what we'll have here is that we'll look at the third decimal place, which is 1, 2, 3, so 9, the first 9. And then we look at the number after 9, which is now 9 as well. So what we'll do, because it's in the range of rounding up, is that we'll add it by 1. Well, something interesting here is that 9 plus 1 equals to 10. So what are we going to do? So what we're going to do is that we're going to have the 10. We're going to keep the 0 in the position of the 9 that we originally had. So 9 plus 1 is 10, so we'll have 0 in the original position. And then we'll add the 1, just like normal subtraction, to the 3. So 1 plus 3 will become 4, and then we'll have 8.46, and the remaining numbers will become zeros. So that will now become 64.84. You can add the 0 because remember it says to 3 decimal places, but most of the time it doesn't matter. So the next point we're going to be looking at is significant figures. So significant figures is very different from decimal places, where significant figures can be any number. 2, 4, 3, 6, 7, 9 are all significant figures to this question, or rather to this number. So again, significant figure is the first non-zero digit. So let's say we are to have for example, let's say we are to have 0.00367. The first significant number, or rather significant figure here, is 3, because we don't count zeros. So if 0 were to be here, we'll not count it. 0 is here, we'll not count it. 0 is here, we'll not count it. It's unless it's a non-zero digit. So let's say 0.36. The first significant figure here is 3, and that's in the first decimal places position. And this is very different from decimal places, because decimal places has to start from the number that is after the point. So 0.04, the first decimal place is still 0. Rather, whereas the first significant figure in this kind of question, rather in this question here, is 4. So that's just to know. So what we'll do here is that we'll look at some questions relating to this. So the first question asks us to round 1.076 to 3 significant figures. So let's write out 1.076. That's what I normally love to do. And what we do is that we'll start from the point of the first significant figure. Remember, significant figure is the first non-zero. And so here, 1 is not 0. So we can say this is our first significant figure. And something to remember here is that if there's a 0 that comes after we have already said this is our first significant figure, this is our second significant figure, etc., we can still count the 0. As long as it is not the first significant figure, we can count the 0. So 0 here will count as a second significant figure. And then 7 will now count as a third. So now that 7 is in the position of the third significant figure, we look at the number that is after 7, which is 6. 6 is in the range where we can round it up, because remember, rounding up has to be in the range of 5 to 9. So what we do is that we'll add 1 to our third significant figure, which is 7, and then it will be 8. And then we turn 6 to 0 because numbers after, when we're done with rounding up, has to turn into 0, while numbers before remain the same. So 1.0 will remain, and the answer to this first question is 1.08. The second question has us rounding 0.00736 to one significant figure. So 0.00736. I forgot the 0 here. And so remember, the first non-significant figure, or rather, the first significant figure is the figure that is not 0. So 0 is here, we will not count it. 0 is also here, we will not count it. 0 is here, we will not count it. But then 7 comes, and 7 will be our first significant figure because it is not 0. And so what we'll do here is that we'll now say the number after 7, which is 3. We'll now see if we can round it up or round it down. And remember, 3 has to be rounded down. And so what we do here is that we'll keep 7, have the other numbers turn to 0, and then the numbers before will remain the same. And remember, it's still 0, so 0.007. So the second answer to this is going to be 0.007. The last question has us working on 23,512,435. What I normally love to do is that I normally like to add commas because this makes it a lot better. So remember, significant figure is the first non-zero digits. It starts with the first non-zero digit. So what we'll have here is 2, which is not a 0 rather. So we'll keep it as our first significant figure. 3 is then our second significant figure. Remember, the question asks us to round it to 2 significant figures. So we'll keep 3, and then we'll look at the next number, which is 5. 5 is in the range where we can round it up, and so that becomes +1 for 3. So this turns to 4, and the numbers after will have to turn to 0. So 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and the numbers before will remain the same. So it turns to 24 million, and that's our last answer for this. So with that being said, here's a question that will be nice to look at. You can pause the video now to take a look. But with that being said, I'd like for us to answer it all together now. If you still do not understand, you can continue now. So the question is, D is equals to the square roots. Remember, this is square roots. 1.95 times 9.92 square all over 8.07. And it says by writing each number correct to one significant figure, work out an estimate for D. So each number in this equation, you can see, has to be in one significant figure before we find out the answer, or rather the estimate. And so what we look is that we'll start by analyzing each number. The first number is 1.95, the second number is 9.92, and the third number is 8.07. So what we'll start by looking at is the first number normally, and that they tell us to write it correct to one significant figure. So we'll start by 1. 1 is not 0. As you remember, significant figures are non-zero figures. It's the first rather non-zero figure. And so due to 1 not being 0, we'll count it as our first significant figure. I remember the question asks us to write it correct to one significant figure. So we'll look at the next number, which is 9, and then we'll see if it's possible for us to round it up or round it down. Due to 9 being a number that's in the range of rounding up, we'll then add 1 to 1. And so this turns into 2, and the numbers after will have to turn into 0. So this will become 2.00. So here's the first part. We can do square roots, and then we can say 2. Because remember, in the points, if there's a 0, 0, you don't need to add it. The next number has 9.92. 9.92. The first significant figure here is, remember, 9. And so now we can look at the next figure, which is 9 as well, and then we can round it up because 9 is in the range where we can round up. So 9 will then become 9 plus 1, and so this will turn into 10. And then the numbers after will become 0 and 0. The next figure, and then, remember in the equation, we can then say times 10 square, because up here there's a square that is affecting the 9.92, so we'll have to retain the square. And then we can now do our over. You look at the third number, which is 8.07. 8 is the first significant figure, so look at the number after. Due to 0 not being in the range of rounding up, rather rounding down, we hereby leave the 8. 8 will now stay here, and then the numbers after will become 0 and 0. And so this will now become over 8. And then through some quick math, we can then say square root of 2 times 100 over 2, which then becomes 200, or rather square root of 200 over 8. I made a mistake here. This should be 8. So 200 over 8, when you put it in your calculator, it becomes 25. And so this becomes root of 25. And so root of 25, remember from one of my older videos, turns into 5. And so the final answer, or rather the final estimate for D will become 5. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you for watching the video. And if you have any more questions, you can possibly type them down in the comments below, and you can even send them to my email, which will also be down in the comments. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned a lot more now. Enjoy your days, enjoy yourself, or rather, stay safe.